And then that's the last step is really the viable economics around the business, and it's interesting, but it's really I use the same process as the positioning process of really understanding what is the core value that people are focused in on that would make them very disappointed not to have that product, and I make sure that my business model. That's why I have a hard time for people who kind of launch the business and know what their business model is and have everything priced up before they've kind of responded to seeing what people like about the product, because they may be sort of charging extra for things that people don't care about and giving away free stuff that people care about. And so by understanding where that core value is first and then layering a business model on top of that, I tend to find that you actually get a lot more effective business model. So this is just a little bit of the optimization process I go through.
Let's come back to that previous point. So how do you find out whether you're overpricing or underpricing? You're still starting with a price, right? It's not that you do everything over free. Check what they respond to and then put a price on it.
Well, it depends on the business. If you have a business that has a really high marginal cost on the product, you might not be able to give it away early. My preference, and I've changed. A year ago, I was very focused on on charging from day one. In fact, that was in my contracts with people. But what I found is that early on, you get a lot of people that are in trials, and then you ask them that question: how would you feel if you could no longer use this product? And based on the conversion percentage, there's certain people that have already decided, I'm not going to pay for this product, therefore I would only be somewhat disappointed if I couldn't have it. So you just don't get as good of a read. So I just recently had a company where I did this exact process, that they were actually charging for the product. They didn't have very many transactions. I had them take the business model off, and we, along with some iterations, we quickly moved it from about a 25% very disappointed number to a 60%. And now I knew who the passionate people were. I had a big enough group where I could build the positioning on their feedback, and then as we put the business model back in, it's much more based on where the value is.
So that's really cool. Basically what you're saying is you like to work with clients who figured out the product stuff. If they have, you want to charge for it right away. If you start working with them and they haven't figured it out, you'll pull the pricing off, make sure you get back to like product that doesn't
Yeah, that's
sell.
just really recent, so we'll see if I keep doing that, but it worked pretty well when I did it.
That's really cool. That's very clear.
But I mean, part of it was like it was the decision of, for companies that have been selling for a while and they have enough paid users that are actually paying, then you get a good read. So if you don't have a trial, then you could actually charge from the beginning and survey that same way. But what I want to be able to do is get as many people as possible in to experience the product without kind of price being a factor, so I can get a big enough pool of people and make a faster decision around some of these things. And it cuts a lot of time off, and it's a lot cheaper to get sort of critical mass to where you can get that feedback. Does that make sense? So just when you're testing landing pages, it was kind of that last place where I butted in on the question to Dave, but like when you know that you're, like, instead of setting targets, like, because people always ask me, oh, we're 7% on our conversion rate, is that good or bad? And for one business, 7% is a dream, and for another business, it's the starting point. And so to me, not only on a landing page level, but on every step within the conversion process, you tend to start out not very optimal, and eventually you reach a point where you can't improve on that number very much, and that's where, yeah, I mean, obviously if you did 1,000 more tests there, you might be able to ratchet it up, but your yield on those tests just isn't worth focusing there. But if there's a point where you're still seeing good improvement, that's kind of the lowest hanging fruit to improve. So basically, once you have that product market fit, once you go through that transition to growth, then you're now in a position to actually grow the business. And this is a slide that's kind of a cleanup of one of Dave's slides, but it's basically, and you could have
proof was left as proof for the reader, I guess.
But you could have 50 pages of tactics to test, and so it's not really, I don't want to go into each tactic because every business is going to be different. But the important thing is that when I'm building channels, I tend to start with the free channels. There's two big considerations: the cost of acquiring a user through that channel, and then how potentially scalable is that channel. And if a channel's free and very scalable, I'm going to try a lot of times to make that channel work. And if a channel's paid and not very scalable, I'm not going to spend very much time on that channel. So it's really kind of just working your way down of what you think is likely to work, and just not spending too much time on something that's just not very scalable. Even if you get it to work, it's not going to be that impactful on the business. So when I'm actually driving the growth, the way that I like to do the budgeting is essentially try to spend as much money as I possibly can. After I've exhausted all of the free channels, then I'm basically spending as much money as I can where I get that positive return on investment. If I spend $1 and get $1.02 back, then I should spend that dollar. I'm not wasting money, I'm making money. So I'm just looking for as many opportunities to keep spending that money. There's a sort of a set of reports and a workflow that I mean, you guys are going to be a long way from being at sort of the growth stage of the company. Hopefully not. Hopefully you'll be there tomorrow, but probably not. The workflow that I had once we were a bigger company and sort of had teams built around each of these is, one, I'm going in and just monitoring growth. I'm seeing how are we relative to our targets. We actually had reports that 4th day into the quarter gave us a prediction of what our revenue was going to be that quarter based on formulas of renewals and how many trials we had in the pipeline and all kinds of things. So just being able to see how are we on those targets. And then I'm looking at anything broken. If the top 10 places where I was getting users and sales from in the past, one of those is missing, I want to get that alert pretty quickly. And it happens all the time that somebody will remove a link, or you just have to be able to really monitor those growth drivers. So there's a set of reports that are monitoring growth. And then another set of reports that I'm using to manage campaigns. So I'm trying to see, like, did a campaign stop working? Sometimes you just work through the traffic within a website or for whatever reason, or maybe if you're in a competitive bidding situation that your bid actually got pushed up because Google has a system where you may bid 50 cents a click, but you're actually only being charged 25 cents a click. But if a new bidder comes in, suddenly you're being charged 35 cents a click, and now it's a money loser. You want to identify that pretty quickly and change your bids around on that campaign. So basically, I go in and just see how are all my campaigns working, fix, optimize, scale the ones that have scale in there that are profitable, cut the ones that aren't working, everything else. So that's the first 5 minutes of the day. And then the next 23 hours are spent on developing new campaigns. It's basically just a whole series of people that are dumping tests into the testing funnel, and we're just trying to find new profitable ways to acquire users. And just to go the full extreme, at LogMeIn, we actually had a guy whose full-time job it was to pull random words to dump into Google content where they weren't as sensitive about sort of contextual match. So take it all the way down to the word "the," and just with the assumption that every single word is going to get clicks on the ads at some level, and those clicks are going to convert at some level, and so there is a profitable bid, even if it's 1/50th of 1 cent. I'm not going to be able to stick there, but the only way to know if there's a profitable bid that will stick is to test it, and so it's just a matter of just churning through. The more tests that you can go through, and then essentially go back to the managed campaigns, cut the ones that aren't working, scale the ones that are, and we ultimately got to the point where at LogMeIn was kind of the last company where I was at that level of just driving and managing growth, that it's a pretty efficient, data-driven process that all the stuff that Dave talked about, but you can kind of see it in action a little bit more here. And then ultimately improving the lifetime value, so customer retention and cross-selling and upselling and adding new products basically expands the value of your users and actually opens up channels that may not have worked previously because you have a higher value per user. This is just a little more detail. I'm done.
Great.